What's up? Welcome to a new episode of Movie Schmovie. This is episode number 376. My name is Steve. I'm one of the co-hosts of the show, and as always, I'm here with
Ron.
John.
Perfect, guys. You guys did so well, so good.
I was thinking about what you said a few weeks ago, Steve, that you were waiting for me to finally jump in and change the paradigm, and I did it.
You did it. I'm so proud of you. I knew you would do it, and it's just like delivered.
Shaboom.
I should have said John, and then when he said Ron, it would have been just perfect.
So yeah, this week's episode, we got a couple things lined up. We've got the Ronald's pick for required viewing, which was 1981's Dragonslayer. Hopefully you watched along with us on that one. The required viewing is recommended more so for you guys. It's required for us, but it's nice if you watch with us.
Yes.
But we'll talk about that in a moment. And then I think you two watched Evil Dead Rise. John, you saw it in theaters, I think. And then Ronald, we finally got the opportunity with the video on demand option coming out earlier this week. So you checked it out. So you guys are going to talk a little bit about that. And then I guess we'll mention some other things that we've watched over the last week. Before we get into required viewing, was there any big news items you wanted to mention? Anything between today and the last time we recorded that you just couldn't wait to talk about on the pod?
I don't know about couldn't wait, but I did read the article today.
And it doesn't qualify, John.
Okay, how about okay? I take that back. I couldn't wait to talk about this with you.
That I can't wait to hear it. Lay it on me, buddy.
But you know what happened once I read this is that then I waited. So I guess I could wait, but I didn't want to wait. There you go.
Preferred not to. Yeah.
Okay.
Only because this seemed like the kind of news that we discuss on the show, and I mentioned it before we started recording. But the idea of Disney Plus and Hulu, is it, that are going to be one entity by the end of the year? Did I read that right?
Yeah. So today we record this on Wednesday. They had their earnings call. Disney did, and Bob Iger made a comment, or basically saying that by the end of the year, Hulu would be a part of Disney Plus, and mainly because I think eventually, with the kind of trend more recently in the ad tier options for a lot of these streaming services, I think that they'll be able to leverage, or at least that's kind of what he was kind of highlighting, was the ability to really leverage advertising more if those were one and the same, since they have a majority share of Hulu. And yeah, I mean, it just seems like it's kind of a trend, another trend, which is just the idea of like kind of consolidating some of these applications, these platforms that are a bit fragmented. Some are not going to survive. We've talked about that many times on the show, but this is an opportunity, just like Warner Discovery is doing with, HBO Max and Discovery Plus becoming, Max. It seems that they're going to do the same thing, over on the Disney side of things with Hulu becoming a part of Disney Plus. Yeah, I guess by the year's end is kind of the interesting piece, because there's been a lot of questions about whether Disney would even hold on to Hulu, especially with Iger coming back in to the mix. But it seems like maybe they will, or maybe it's becoming more of a leverage or a piece of leverage for them to be able to kind of have more advertising opportunities inside of Disney Plus. But it was probably one of the more interesting things on the earnings call today. As a Disney shareholder, I was privy to that call, so I was able to hear that. And there wasn't a lot of big bullet points, but that was probably one of the bigger ones that got picked up. And well,
Steve, the other one that I wanted to mention that's in the same breath as that, though, is that they've also sort of made it clear that they're going to start removing exclusive content from the service.
Right.
That seems like another thing these services like to do. I thought the whole premise of these streaming services was that, if you like the Warner Brothers IP, you like their content. I mean, I'm using their words. You like their IP, you like their content, you like their franchises. Come here, and here's where the library will be. Disney too, and here's where the library is going to live. It's a little strange to me that they're taking things away. I mean, I get the idea if something's just kind of sitting there and maybe it's not doing a lot for them, but another part of me thinks, aren't we just kind of ending up with cable again, like a possibly more expensive version of cable, if you're really going to hold on to all the content you've been enjoying? And to me, that just seems like it's just a weird landscape now. I mean, everything you just said, places that are consolidating, places that are going away, perhaps. price models that are changing, and might even, like, we're talking about ads again. I don't know. I just think there's an interesting. I mean, there's no guarantee that anything's ever going to stay. Any industry, entertainment wise, is going to stay the same. Like music, how you receive your music. Well, if you're a music fan, that's changed a lot in the last 20, 30 years. If you're a TV fan, that's changed a lot too. I just am thinking it's interesting that we're now entering into this sort of like all the stuff that seemed to be the advantage of the streaming services is now becoming, it's being rolled back a little bit. I'm not saying that the stuff they're making isn't just as good, and that maybe it's not working financially. As a shareholder, I'm sure you might have a slightly different opinion than you do as a viewer sometimes.
Right.
But like, I don't know. I mean, does it seem like we're just in a huge state of flux in every aspect of the movie and television industry right now? I mean, we even have a writer's strike going on right now that's going to send ripples through what's being made probably for the next little while. So it just feels like the streamers and the studios and everybody's kind of scrambling right now to figure out what's the new way we can make our money.
Yeah, I mean, definitely.
I think the acquisition, I mean the merging of the two is a couple of things that I guess that the average consumer doesn't think about. It's technology. Hulu's been around for a while too. Their video quality is noticeably better. Or just it streams pretty fast. It buffers pretty fast. It's so it could be also information, technology.
The best app, and unless I'm not thinking of one, I feel like the Hulu app is the most appealing to work with. Absolutely.
Especially just in terms of just looks of the video, like whatever encoding they're using. Right. It's incredible. So like I would love to see how that folds into Disney stuff, and they could get some of that content. They do have some Marvel content there, MODOK and a couple others, which is pretty cool. But yeah, it's interesting. You're right.
What do you think about them taking stuff away, Ronald? I mean, like,
it's terrible. I mean, what is the incentive? Like, you need to incentivize. Okay, so I was going to say something about the money thing. You're absolutely right. I think there was a time where people thought that like this would be like a super duper discount on their content. But I think about it a very different way. I'm watching things that I pay for that I want to see versus just spending $150, $120 to $150 on a bunch of channels that I will not watch. I always watch Hulu. I don't always watch Netflix, but I always watch Hulu. I watch Netflix. Aaron watches Netflix, and I consume a ton of YouTube TV stuff.
You know what, Ronald? I always watch Hulu, and I always look at Netflix.
Yeah. Yeah,
I don't always end up watching something.
I always try to find something on Netflix.
Isn't it funny that it's like the boomer?
Yeah, it's turned into that kind of thing. But they have good stuff.
No, they do. I'm not talking about the content. I'm just talking about the status of Netflix as a brand is an interesting. They've been around the longest, kind of in this part of the game.
Yeah. What do you think, Steve? What do you think about the folding of the two? Save us some money, right?
Yeah, and I mean, I think they're trying to beef up one platform. They're like,
for sure,
pulling content or the exclusive content, like John had mentioned. Like that's, I feel like that's more based around things that maybe aren't necessarily driving subscriber growth, but is more just things that they can leverage or license or sell off to other platforms, even that are looking for more content. Or have it stream exclusively somewhere else, whatever that case may be. Like not in the same respect, but like kind of becoming an arms dealer type of a platform like Sony does, where they just pump out stuff and they sell it to whoever wants to buy it, because they don't have a platform. But a Disney and Warner Discovery, kind of taking that action where they're saying it's not going to be exclusively on here, or it's not going to be on here at all. It's going to be over there. It's not surprising, because I think, when you look at, just the 2 points that we're discussing, which is that you're going to take all the Hulu stuff and put it inside of Disney Plus.
Yeah.
So you want the best of both, or the things that you think as a business or as a platform is going to drive subscriber growth. And, because that's what matters now, is the subscriber growth, and making money and profits. Like, the bubble that's kind of bursted already. The great Netflix downfall last year is kind of what changed everything. And if they're not driving subscriber growth and making money, You know, they're trying to, they're, I'm not saying it's right or wrong. I'm just saying that's what they're doing is they're trying to figure out ways to accomplish that, which is folding things in together. What's the best of everything that we have? Let's put it in one thing. And the things that we don't see as driving subscriber growth, but is content or, you know, products that we still, you know, have ownership over, you know, finding a new home for it to make money on it. I mean, that's literally what Warner Discovery's doing. Like they're taking all these things off of HBO and getting all this flack for it, and justly so, because it is kind of like your mission statement is kind of changed, but the whole industry has changed. So I think it's all fluid, and I think, you know, the ones that are going to survive are going to have to do some variation of this, which is consolidate, power up, and sell off what is, you know, not making money or not driving subscriber growth. And the ones that don't do that are the ones that are probably going to be gone within a year or two.
Yeah.
You know, like some of the smaller ones that we've talked about that we may like, you know, but just don't seem to be really growing or making money, you know? So, but yeah, it'll be interesting to see, you know, what each does. And they've all kind of gone out of their comfort and changed their tune. You know, Netflix has an ad tier now, you know, so nothing gold can stay, and they're just changing everything in any way they can to be as viable and as successful as they can.
Yeah,
100%. Well, ad tiers and weekly models, you know, Netflix is, you know, even if it hasn't happened fully yet, the conversation is definitely on about like what's the best way for people to receive certain types of entertainment. And even the binging shows that will still want to be bingy, they're breaking the season up into 2 chunks or 3 chunks or whatever they can do to make it have more, you know, more of a staying power in people's minds.
Very interesting. And Netflix stuff in the States isn't weekly, and it's weekly every other place. Like you know, when you travel a little bit, you see that there are weekly shows, even if they're ones that like air on TV that they've been doing weekly. It's like almost like a pilot that they've been running for like 5 years in other places, but now it's becoming like a States thing. And I think that people haven't been in as big of an uproar as you think. Like, you know, people are like, I can only binge it. That's the only way I can watch it. And then some things are weekly and people are perfectly okay with it. You know what I mean? So that's cool.
Yeah, we'll see.
Yeah.
Anything else before we move over to the required viewing? Anything else, John? That was you're waiting all week to talk about.
That I could wait, but didn't want to.
Yeah,
I didn't want to. Kind of, sort of, but didn't want to quite. I get it.
Cool. Well, Ronald, tell us about your pick again. Let's recap and then let's talk about it.
Yeah.
And how many Ks did you watch it in?
Oh, you know, I watched a special one. So this is Matthew Robbins' Dragonslayer, 1981, a very special, interesting movie because, you know, this is before, you know, heavy duty CGI. So it has a lot of elements of practical effects, which is really cool to see. People touching tangible things, you know what I mean? People touching things and beating up puppets.
Yeah,
in
puppets
their laps.
And miniatures and
miniatures
and like animatronic or
hell yeah, man,
akin to that. Yeah,
real fire around people. Like it's like, you know, it really feels lived in. So I've always heard about it, and I heard that there was a special Paramount released a special 4K that came out this year. So I was like chomping at the bit because I'm like, this is the perfect. You know, what's happening is all the companies, all the boutique companies are people our age that are like, you know what, I would love to see look a little better.
It never got the love.
Yeah. So
let's give it its flowers.
Yeah,
let's go.
Hell yeah, man. So I had the pleasure of seeing this in the, you know, I guess the closest thing to a theatrical release that I could see it in. This was like an amazing DTS 5.1 mix. It was crazy looking, to be honest, and very loud, very like this is a lot meaner movie than I expected. How did you guys feel about it? It felt mean. Like it was like it felt like it should have been like a kids movie, but it is a mean movie.
I didn't really remember a lot of the movie. Like John had mentioned the last episode, I remembered a couple couple sequences
Mhm.
from when I watched it, like when I was a kid or younger. I don't know how old I was when I first saw it, but watching it again, like and kind of really having the perspective of where it is and as a Disney movie. I
Mhm.
feel like a lot of times, like Black Cauldron and some other Disney movies that came out in the 80s and maybe early 90s, like kind of got a little bit of a like this is a darker Disney movie.
Yeah,
This is a pretty dark live action Disney movie,
it is.
and
Well, it's a co-production with Paramount, and like Paramount is on the poster.
yeah, and but I mean, like the first thing that comes up when you watch it is Disney.
No, but well, you see the Disney name in there, but it also is
Yeah, that's
saying
what I'm talking
Paramount.
about.
But I'm
Yeah,
just saying that it's like doesn't have like the Disney like castle. It's not a Disney movie in the way that say like the Black Cauldron is a Disney movie that is a full-on Disney movie. But it is interesting. This is like one of two very strange, or at least I know Popeye was like the next co-production with Disney, and I don't know if
Oh,
it was the
wow.
same studio. But I mean, those are both very weird movies. Like it's almost like I think it was Buena Vista International that released them, but then in the States it was all handled through Paramount, and that's how Disney the American Disney arm kind of stayed away from quote unquote tarnishing the brand or stepping outside of that safe for families kind of vein.
That makes sense.
This movie definitely is like a movie that what was the thing recently that people were I guess it's Guardians 3 that some people have been talking about how it's really not for kids, like and I think that this was a movie that had that conversation going around it in 81 of like people that thought, oh yeah, it's kind of it'll be like a kid's adventure. And then you see it and it's like not that it's necessarily for adults, but it definitely is not for little kids the way
Yeah,
that
for
a
sure.
straight Disney production would have seemed.
Yeah, so what'd you guys think about it?
I mean, I mean, it's fun. I mean, it's interesting. I think the most interesting piece for me watching it is just the reminder, like you'd already mentioned, Ronald, is it's kind of like it definitely gets respect for the dragon work, like this
Yeah.
the practical effect and the way they use like motion smoothing to capture the dragon in motion. And it was something that was, I mean, it's crazy to think, but like for that time and that era and like what it preceded, was pretty revolutionary in a lot of different ways. And the guy Phil Tippett, who did this, and he did like stuff with Star Wars and whatnot. But like this go motion technology that they basically created and used in this movie, it's kind of what led to a lot of other things that we saw in that period. And researching it a little bit, it was crazy to me, and I feel like I saw this in that documentary about the production of Jurassic Park, but that this technology initially, when they were making Jurassic Park or in pre-production on it, was what Spielberg was going to use for all the dinosaur scenes in Jurassic Park. And this is all before,
wow.
yeah, this is all before Dennis Moran, who is the subject of the documentary that I'm referring to, kind of like convinced him of the possibilities, like with the computer effects that he was kind of revolutionizing and pioneering at the time. But it's just kind of cool to think about, the dragon, the way that Vermithrax looks in this, and like the motion and how it moves and the fire and just how mean and nasty and scary the dragon is. That is really what stands out to me watching the movie. I mean, the performances are really fun. I really do think that Valerian and Galen are great together. Those are really fun, good performances.
Yeah.
But
Rob
yeah,
Richardson is really interesting as what's his name? Erlich? Is that the wizard?
The first one?
Yeah,
who are you talking about?
Ulrich. I'm sorry, Ulrich.
Yeah.
The guy who dies and comes back.
Yeah.
Just he had like an interesting, odd like quality to him. There's something kind of funky about the tone and feel of this movie, the dark fantasy thing that they're doing. It's not, it's not quite full on fairy tale. It definitely has like a different place. It reminds you of movies like Legend or something like that, where it's fantasy but with a literally dark, like it's shadowy and kind of scary. It almost feels like a fantasy horror blend at times.
I was really happy to see Sidney Bromley, who was in Neverending Story. He was the little elf in the Neverending Story. His voice is so distinct. And as Hodge, he just has like this ornery soul to him. It's like he's very like, I don't want to go through this. He's very, very fiery. I loved it. And his fate really made me sad, but it's cool to see actors in these kind of fantasy driven movies. Like he has a look to him that kind of makes you want to cast him in something back in the olden days. He has like a cool look to him.
Yeah, talking about sad fates. The thing that the imagery, I think I said last time, even that there was some stuff in this movie that really disturbed me when I was a kid, and I saw it on HBO. And now I can tell you, it's the princesses. The first scene with the dragon, with the princess who's chained up. I remember like seeing when she's trying to get out and her wrists get all bloody. That really stuck with me when I was a kid. And then she seems like she might be about to get away, and then she gets roasted by the dragon, and that's pretty bad. But then later, Princess Elspeth, when she's down in the cave, like she's trying to bravely sacrifice herself so that she isn't protected from being fed to the dragon like all the other times. And when she goes down in there and like it's just like something that doesn't usually happen in this kind of movie, is at that point in the movie for someone to have this fate that's like misguided heroism. She goes into the cave to sort of sacrifice herself. I guess she knew she might die or expected to die, but what happens is the baby dragons get her and they're like picking her apart, and like there's this really gory shot of one working on her ankle that's like completely the meat is gone from her ankle and the foot's still there, and then in a couple shots later the little baby dragon chomps her foot off and has it in her mouth, and it's just like a full-on like horror movie prosthetic, as far as like with the blood and everything. It just, I remember that image so much, and not just that it had that kind of violence in it or that kind of gore, but that you just, at that point for me, I would have been, I guess I would have been 8 when this movie came out. So I must have been 9 or 10 or something when I saw it on television. I don't know that I'd seen that kind of violence thrown at like the pretty princess character before. I really was expecting them to escape. As an adult, I can see this is the kind of movie that shows you all these other people dying. Like so does the priest that goes out there and tries to send the dragon to hell or whatever. He dies too. So in this movie, it's like, okay, none of the conventional characters are going to be at the center of this story. There's no knights. So I do think that like having the princesses go in this awful way is this kind of this is what makes it a dark fairy tale or dark fantasy. But seeing those scenes, I don't know if you've ever had that. I'm sure we all have those things you watch when you were a kid and you see them as an adult, and even though you can see them more for what they are now, it still has that memory never goes away of like, this is that part, this is that part that used to like make me want to cover my eyes, or like I almost wish I could have unseen it, when I was a kid, her ankle getting chewed on.
That's gross, man.
Yeah,
it was gruesome.
I particularly hated anything bad happening to pretty girls and pretty women when I was a kid. Like for some reason that really, I'm not saying it shouldn't rattle you, but I'm saying in particular when I was a kid, I was just like, what? You can't do that,
Yeah.
But going to the effects and the gore, there's like the other side of the gore is when the dragon dies later and you see all of its flesh hanging out. I mean, that was like gruesome in a different way, but it does feel like, as to what you were saying, Ronald, they're trying to give this a little bit of reality or something. Like, even though it's set in like a fantasy land, it's sort of it's like set, the idea of it being like this is like a pre-Christianity sort of taking over world. And it's sort of the Dark Ages or whatever. And I think that there is something interesting about that vibe that makes this movie, that feels very much of its time in a lot of ways, that makes it feel different from a lot of things. And you're right, it is very loud. It's a weirdly loud movie.
It's a loud movie.
The score in particular is like very intrusive, and it's not just like, it's not like that kind of score that underscores the emotion of the scene. It's kind of the score that's just kind of doing its own thing, and it's just like, I think it's mimicking like medieval musical themes and stuff. But I found that the score almost worked against the grain of the movie. Like if this movie had a John Williams type score, I think it would feel very much more like what we're comfortable with in this genre.
The dragon's so mean. He's like plays with the people. He like hesitates when he's about to strike. He gives people this like, this chance, this little millisecond of a chance where you feel like you're gonna get away, and then it doubles down and does something crazy. It's just brutal. I was not expecting this dragon to be so damn brutal. But overall, I kind of feel the way that Steve feels. Like it was pretty good. It was pretty good. It was fun. I think I'll watch it again at some point. I thought this feels like something about the beginning when they were coming to find the sorcerer just felt very like My Speed. Just so he knocked on the door. It's like,
well, that scene is so weird. Like you don't really know what you're watching when the guy comes in and he gets the knife and It's like, I'll show you that I have magical powers.
Yeah.
And then he kills him.
What was that?
Well, I mean, I think that was a kind of like Jesus-y or Gandalf-y kind of thing where it's like, you strike me down, I'll come back later more powerful or something.
Yes.
But there is something very strange about that, because you could see the movie that isn't going to bring him back and that just has him die in this kind of chump sort of fashion very early in the movie. But it's the rhythms of it. I mean, it's a very weird, I don't know. It's one of those things where it's hard for me to know, is it just that storytelling techniques have changed, or is this a little bit of an odd movie that's almost clicks, you know what I mean? It almost clicks, and but it doesn't quite, and therefore it feels interesting because it's odd. But I wonder how much of the charm comes from the kind of janky aspects of this movie. But I will say also the visuals, I don't know if the Amazon version is the same 4K that you watched, but it said 4K on some listing I found, and it looked, I mean, I'm not saying the effects looked like they were made today. I don't even care that much about this, but I think it's very interesting to see a movie where the effects still look of their time, but the picture is as cleaned up as it can be. And so you get this there are honestly some beautiful images in this movie. I thought, like, just a few scenes, like them walking through the scenery, the colors, the mix, the film grain, the old techniques, everything. I really appreciated it. There's other parts where it's like, oh, that looks fake as hell, but it still looks cool, kind of to what you were saying, Ronald, all the different ways they achieve these dragon effects with you know, between Phil Tippett and Dennis Muren and all the other techniques they were using. I think this is the first movie that ILM made that wasn't a Star Wars movie. I think this is the first time they did effects for an outside movie, or one of the first times. And so it has that kind of state-of-the-art sort of effects that, just like the Star Wars effects, can sometimes look dated, but they still look cool, you know? I like seeing like a cleaned up film that's not modified. Like, give me 100%. The crispest possible version of what it should have looked like back in the day. But don't feel like you have to go in and modernize the effects. That's not necessary.
Old stuff just looks better in 4K. Like, it's no comparison. Like, it's sharper. New stuff is sharper, but this stuff looks so good. Like, it's just,
well, they get the lighting right. Like, there's a scene early on, and I don't know if it's like a dungeon but the area where the wizard was like meeting with the people at the very beginning. And the camera kind of pulls out, and it's like this dark dungeony place, and you can like see in the shadows like this. It looked really good. I was like, I wonder if this would, if I could, I haven't seen a side by side, but I wonder if you had a side by side, if this would look.
That scene was cool because
shots like that would look dramatically better, you know.
Because he's walking forward and setting all the light. He's like, he's just like saying all of these spells, and I've never seen a shot like that before.
Well, I don't know. You can't tell if it's supposed to be trickery or not. At that part, I was like, is this guy a real wizard or is this trickery?
I mean, I think it was trickery because he just got stabbed in the stomach. I mean, I was trying to figure out if he did come back.
He had some game,
and then he became like a weapon of mass destruction. He just kind of suicide bombed himself in the middle of the.
Well, I do love that. Like, it's one of those movies where, you know how the people say Raiders of the Lost Ark, if Indiana Jones hadn't done anything, the same things would have happened, like, more or less.
No, I never.
And I don't really love that criticism, because I feel like you can play that game with a lot of movies. Of like, what really, but I do think it's funny that at the end of this, basically, the guy, it's. The wizard dies. He's got the now Peter McNichol has the amulet, so he's kind of the one with the magic now. But it's like later when he does the heroic thing of like stopping the dragon, he still does it just when the wizard tells him to. So it's like all he's really there to do is like hold the rock up and smash the thing at the right time. He doesn't really have to. I guess he has some pretty brave fighting earlier, but I just thought that was kind of an interesting thing of like, if you were working this movie out now, you would probably have it so that the wizard wasn't there to help him at the moment when he needed it most, because it does kind of feel like, oh, good thing he's around to follow instructions at the end. But I still think it's it feels a little long just because of those early 80s pacing issues compared to what we expect today, but I think it's got kind of a hypnotic quality to it. So yeah, I was very interested in watching it, and then seeing it look all cleaned up definitely felt like, okay, this is worthy of. This is like totally makes it worth putting on a movie after this many years to see it again. Was just seeing a fresh presentation of it. So, Ronald, how do you feel about your choice?
I'm glad I picked it. I'm so glad I picked it. It was a fun ride. You know, it's like I said, a little more brutal than I was expecting. The baby dragons getting murdered. It's like, what?
Like eating a girl and then getting murdered. It's like boom, boom. This is awful. You know?
Yeah, it's awful. But I would watch it again. I'm gonna for sure watch it again. I appreciate that. What about you, Steve? What'd you think?
Yeah,
You thought-
no, yeah. I mean, I liked it. I mean, it feels like a 1981
Hell yeah.
dragon movie, but I can appreciate that knowing, kind of that
Yeah.
it's 40 plus years old. You're like, wow, this is still pretty entertaining for that
Yeah, 42.
Yeah.
that time. But yeah, no, for sure. And also, seeing the special, the effects piece is really the big takeaway for me. But no, it's cool. And I
Also, young
actually
Peter
watched it
Nickel
on.
occasionally looks like Jonathan Groff. Did anyone else notice that? There's certain angles that he gives Groff. Groff. Is it Groff or Groth?
Mm.
Groff.
Jonathan Groff, yeah. All right. So is it my pick for next week? All right, cool. I have a movie that came out in 2020. This was the other big Mads Mikkelsen film of 2020 besides Another Round. But this movie's called The Riders of Justice or Riders of Justice. It's a Danish film. It's kind of like a dark comedy revenge thriller. I had seen a ton about it towards the end of that year, and it's always been on my watch list, and I've never gotten around to seeing it. And for some reason, watching some of the trailers for Dial of Destiny recently and seeing a lot of people post about Hannibal recently, I was just like, oh, what was that Mads film that I wanted to watch a few years ago? I saw Another Round that year, which is, I think, got a lot of the awards attention. But this was the other one that he had, which is, also was a big hit. And I think it was like one of the top grossing films in Denmark that year. It is a Danish film. It is available on Hulu. If you want to watch along, mentioning Hulu earlier, while it's still its own platform, you can watch it on there. And yeah, just in the mood for some Mads. I'm a fan.
Cool.
So it's called Riders of Justice.
Riders of Justice. Okay. Oh, for sure. I'm looking it up now. I'll for sure check this out. Cool.
Yeah, it's got pretty good reviews too. So
I've never heard of this.
That's good. This is perfect. This is wonderful.
Hell yeah, man. Thank you.
That's the reason why we have this feature.
Yeah, right.
I love it. Cool.
Very cool. So guys, talk to me about Evil Dead Rise.
I'm gonna let you start with that, John.
Okay. This might be my favorite horror franchise.
Wow.
That's a good one.
I mean,
it's a good one. It's solid.
I mean, it's like each time they do something it's like the Mad Max of horror franchises.
Yeah.
In a lot of ways, really, if you want to start forcing that comparison, because it's got that similar thing of like, now there's a new wave and we don't have the old guy in it, and that person did 3 of them. But I mean, like, I just think it's great that when they make an Evil Dead movie, the rules are not, how do we tie this to the franchise? The rules are not, how do we follow up the story of the last one? How do we push forward the mythology? How do we spin this off from the last whatever? It's more like, how do we go dark and evil and scary and mean and violent? And the humor, there's a moment in this where something is being fed into like a wood chipper and someone's using a chainsaw to do something else, and there's so much blood and there's so much chaos, and it's just so fucked up, and it's so gross and so weird that I laughed out loud in the theater.
It's
at like a gory, like this is gore you can laugh at. It's not just gore you can laugh at, it's gore that like rattles you into the state of like laughter's like the only acceptable response in a way. So I just think that that's a cool style for a series, to say like our what ties these movies together is that we make it fucked up. We go for something that feels a little more visceral, because these deadites, that what makes them different from demons and zombies and other movies. And now so many things have kind of followed this mold that it's hard to separate it in some ways. But I think the Evil Dead still has the corner on the market when it comes to, or corner of the market when it comes to, like, the demon is possessing somebody and using the memory of the person and using the image of the person and using the voice of the person in a really mean-spirited way to like, I'm about to kill you because you're possessed, Ronald. And then it goes to your voice and it says, John, don't hurt me. We're friends. Like the fact that it always has that tool in its toolbox, that means just, I don't know, there's just something about that that works on me every time. The idea that that something's going to try to use sadness against you, and the tragedy of somebody dying, like someone's going to get possessed and they're still there, and you're chopping them up because you're fighting them, but there's still some way in there you believe the person you loved is there, or their soul is in hell being tortured. Like that's the other
Yeah.
thing that kind of comes up in these movies. And I also think the setup of the book and the word, like how they get that in there, just those little things that are what combine these movies, is that like these demons are summoned when somebody does something with the book, and then they come, and then the camera rushes up on somebody and you don't really see what they see, but you know that whatever then gets inside them is going to mess things up. It's just it's a formula that just works. And I think that even though they've said they're going to try to make them more frequently now, I like the idea that this isn't a franchise that's trying to stay like at part of the conversation all the time, that when they come back and make one, it feels like there's a difference to it. And I think we're all big fans of the remake from 2013, was it?
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah,
So it's like 10 years later, here comes another one that I think may have the rockiest sort of first half hour sort of start. Like it feels a little slow moving, and the character setups are a little clumsy, but the performances are good. The photography's great. And once it kicks off, Ronald, it's like once it's off, it's like, okay, now we are totally kicking off here. And then it's like your idea of who might be safe and who might not be is pretty. I don't know. They really play a lot with like who you expect to see awful things happen to and who you don't. I don't know, Ronald, what about you? I don't know if you go back with this series quite as much as I do. Like this was one of my high school favorites back in the day, the first two.
Yeah, I love the first one. I need to go back and watch Army of Darkness. I haven't seen it in a while, and I know that it just keeps like every couple years it just keeps getting better looking and better looking. I know they like keep doing things to it. But 2013's Evil Dead is like one of my favorites of all time. It did something to me. It had a lot to live up to. And I was telling Steve earlier, I don't understand how the gap between the 2013 Rotten Tomatoes score, which is like a 67, and this one, which is like in the mid 80s, which is strange to me because critically,
Okay.
I didn't look at the audience. I should have looked at the audience, but critically,
who gives a fuck what those mouth breathers think, Ronald?
yeah, it's so weird. But I'll say this: I don't like it as much as I like the 2013 one, but it's fun as shit. And the problem is the absurdity of the 2013 one, and the pacing was kind of cool. Like it had a story that kind of brought you into it, explained it really quickly, and then shit kind of kicked off. Like you were saying, this one has the roughest kind of way to go. Out of all the ones that I've seen, out of all the Evil Deads, this one feels like it was doing too much in the beginning. It kind of maybe should have started right from wherever the primary location was. But the way that they tied it up in the end, I guess could be seen as like, oh, that was the twist, that, you're watching something maybe out of context of when you think you're watching it, which is fucking awesome. But
plus that cold open gives you maybe a little juice at the beginning
100%.
that makes you a little more patient as you're sitting through that kind of somewhat awkward character setup to stuff that they do.
But yeah, that's the problem. I just saw the 2013 one, and it kind of like I felt almost the same. And I watched this one and I was like, oh, but it was still solid. It still felt fun. And the things that they do towards the end, the third act that you speak of, they really make some choices. They make some choices. You will not, there's no way you can guess what's going to happen. It's no way.
Even if you guess like who might be the main person,
100%.
you can't guess what's going to happen to the people around them.
It can.
There's one little detail that is so fun about that I wouldn't spoil for anybody, but just there's a line or two that gets said in this movie that's all about like what the main character is trying to do. That is almost like a sick joke by the time you get to the end.
Yes.
If you know what I'm talking about, Ronald.
Oh,
like
100%.
What they promise somebody, and then it's like, okay, no way to keep that promise.
Yeah. And then there's a serious homage to another film, just like smack dab in the middle of the movie. Like that felt like I liked it, but maybe I need to watch it again to see how I feel about it. You know what I'm talking about? The elevator.
But what is that a reference to?
The Shining.
Oh yeah, I guess I
The
guess
Shining.
I
It
guess
was
I
a
don't care
very
about that.
shiny.
I think it fits the over the topness of this. But yes, it's definitely like, okay, now we've seen that happen in 2 movies.
Yes, yeah. It was like, holy shit. But overall, I'd say it's a good head, but 2013 is so fucking good. Like
Right.
oh,
This is not as good as that.
I can't recommend this one over that one, but if you saw that one and you're like, oh, well, this is a good one. This feels a little more accessible in a way somehow. Like
It's almost like more formulaic. It's
it
almost
is.
like it's a more mediocre horror movie, and then then it turns into an Evil Dead movie. So you
Yeah.
could almost view that as meta, but I don't think they were trying to be meta. I think it's really just that it's difficult to set up a whole new set of characters
Yeah.
and not have it feel a little kind of forced in some ways. But I think the setup of the remake from 2013, where it's like they're repeating the cabin setting, which is great. Can't get better than that. Go to a cabin, there's a creepy book, there's a creepy recording, all that shit is perfect.
Yeah.
The other thing is it's got the setup of friends, and one of the friends is a recovering addict, and no one
Yes.
trusts her. That's a beautiful setup for
It's
this type of
so
story
good.
where
Yeah.
everybody's there for her, but they're also sort of they're like a little bit begrudging her.
100%.
The new Hellraiser movie tried to play around with this idea too, of just like, what if
Yeah.
you had a protagonist who no one is going to take fully at their word. But I do think that it's like, I saw someone say, this is my least favorite Evil Dead movie, but I love them all, kind of,
Yeah.
and yeah, this might be a strong like for me rather than a love, but I think that what it does well, no one else is doing, and so I do kind of love like the last 45 minutes or whatever of this movie. I do love.
Yeah.
As a movie, I do think you're right, Ronald, that it's hard to beat the 2013 model, and the 2013 one is such a wonderful movie because it was hard to imagine a remake that made any sense. Evil Dead is so
100%.
specific, and it's so tied to Bruce Campbell's tone. It's like there's no way to repeat that. I'm so glad they didn't try to. And I'm really interested to see what they might be doing now, because now there's a little talk about supposedly Sam Raimi sent Bruce Campbell a picture of himself with the Jane Levy from the remake, like photoshopped in, that said, "Hit the gym, lardass."
Oh wow.
So I don't, Bruce Campbell, at least, he likes to tease the fans about stuff. But the
Yeah.
idea that they might bring this franchise around into some kind of mega movie that really pays off everything they've been doing, they don't need to do that. But
Yeah.
I love the idea
I'd
of
love
them
that.
being able to play around with the mythology and say, well, this is an Ash movie and this is another freestanding one or whatever, like bring it on, but
Yeah.
still, I think space them out, still make it special, because that's part
Yeah.
of the reason. I mean, I was hot to see this movie when it came out, because an Evil Dead movie, even like the title card of this movie in the theater, it's a
Wait,
really
that's-
cool moment when the title
Oh,
comes up.
God, that was so cool, man.
It just feels good. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, man. Overall, thought it was solid, man. Just not 2000, not our 2013. Not our 2013. And since horror was just invented, fairly recently, I appreciate you guys
Talking about Jordan Peele inventing the
putting
horror
me
movie
onto
with
the
brains.
genre along with the sci-fi genre.
Oh yeah, I was sci-fi.
Sci-fi and horror.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was interesting. Like when like, just to kind of some transparency, like on our text thread when we were talking about, it coming out on the digitally this week. I think John had mentioned, like, I don't know if that's like a good or a bad thing, or
Right.
or in terms of its performance.
Yeah.
Right.
But it is just it's like the new way of doing things. It's just the way that, like Mario Brother, like that movie's going to be out soon too, and John Wick's coming out soon. These movies that make a ton of money, they come to digital or to a demand or streaming platform so much quicker now, because the windows have shrunken so much, and each studio kind of does it their own way. But the fact that last week, like, we were able to mention like 3 movies that had come out on video on demand, all within 17 to 24 days of its release, and this is a movie, Evil Dead Rise, that like wasn't even supposed to go to theaters. This was supposed to be a HBO Max original streaming film that they were happy with and decided, no, this is a theatrical movie. And to John's comment, like, this is a movie that was very successful. Like, this is a movie that, has crossed $100 million at the worldwide box office as of, this past weekend. And it's still in theaters, and it's on demand now, because this is the kind of title that does do well, at home, and they just have the opportunity to still kind of draft a little bit off of the marketing from the movie when it came out in theaters, and there's still, there's lots of social media still going around about this film. So, hopefully that, they try to figure out a way to kind of capitalize on that. And it's cool to see a movie that is successful and still kind of coming out. This is kind of like there's a sweet spot where I feel like I fall with this topic where, the movies are, I'm still for like a theatrical option,
Yeah.
for any and all these films that were ever intended for it. And like, I'd prefer to always see a movie in theaters in most cases, but
Right.
I just feel like it's just it's a nice middle ground. It feels like where a movie has a chance to run, has a chance to really kind of build word of mouth and have some legs at the theater, and then kind of make its way over to home, and really kind of capitalize on that word of mouth and that goodwill and the success. And on the other side of it, if a movie is not performing or underperforming, it still is the same kind of action. Is that okay? Well, even if it's not really reaching the audience, there's still an opportunity for us to kind of capitalize or leverage or kind of take advantage of that marketing that is still in and around the real world and the digital world, the social platforms and social media, that may still like allow a movie to find another life, or another opportunity to be successful, at home. So I think it's cool. It's like it's so interesting to me to see, this ever changing window, from studio to studio or just movie to movie, really, just depending on how well to see how well it does. It's exciting. And I think like even how bad I want to see this in theaters, I have not had the opportunity, but it does really make me happy that like, okay, well, I have a nice setup at my house. I can watch it at home now if I want to. And I'm sure I'll probably enjoy it as much. So
yeah.
I
saw one of those PVOD movies. Speaking of which, are we getting into things we've seen?
Sure. Yeah. What else? What did you watch?
Guy Ritchie's The Covenant.
Oh yeah. How was it?
It was incredible.
I've heard nothing but like great things about this movie.
I'm not like a huge war movie guy, man. Like I don't, whenever they come up, I don't see them very often. But Dar Salim and Jake Gyllenhaal.
Jakey.
Those two together.
I was like, I'm not a big war guy. I'm not a big war guy, but I'm a big Jakey guy.
I will watch anything he's in, man. It's cool.
All of it. Give it all to me.
He kind of meets this interpreter. He's a little older than the other interpreters. He's a smart ass, and Jake is like, I like this guy.
So how does Guy Ritchie make so many movies?
I don't know, man. Like, I think he needs to start
pumping him out, baby.
I was gonna say that, man. He's in the conversation to me. He's always been in the conversation, but
is it just like if we looked, would we see there was like 2 years where he didn't make a movie or something?
I don't know.
He was actually making like an extra movie that got because it does seem like the last couple of years it's been like every 6 months there's a new.
He's making up for all the time he was off the charts with making Aladdin and King Arthur.
That's kind of what I mean, though. It's like maybe that is it.
Totally.
He's like he's
back to making, I guess, the movies. Yeah, that he or the way he wants to make them, if anything.
Yeah. What was the budget
he's got,
on this
it's
movie?
weird that he's got such a style, and then he also has this kind of journeyman director career. Like it's an interesting career. I mean, I wouldn't suggest that we necessarily ever would need to look at every movie he's made, but like I do think he's got one of those careers that's an interesting one to look at, because there's clearly the sort of movies he makes that are his type of movie, and then there's the type of kind of work for hire, more blockbuster type movie.
Yeah.
Like this just did not, the previews for this, it did not look or feel like a Guy Ritchie movie to me. Is the movie itself a little bit more stylized, Ronald, than the trailers would indicate?
No, it's like, one thing that he does well is he films the action really well, but you wouldn't know this was a Guy Ritchie thing. There's no like, oh, here's what I'm going to do. They kind of pan around.
Like title card with like a cool freeze frame and the person's name comes up.
There's literally none of that. It's crazy. There's no like signature. It's just the action scenes are filmed so well. And one thing that I think that Guy Ritchie does really well is he can really map out conflict very well. So it's a really complex idea, like an interpreter kind of helping and what they represent and some of the dangers that an interpreter, because he's considered a traitor. Wherever he goes, he's like, you're working with the states. Like, how are you doing this? But they explain that in such a cool way. And they really make it very clear that this guy is like, this isn't a white savior movie. because the interpreter saves Jake Gyllenhaal first, and then he has to save him. But when he saves him, there's just like so much heart in it. When they first reunite after it, you know, that he's been where he is. Like there's this moment where they're just kind of staring at each other. You know what I mean? It's just like this bromance that should not be as like emotional as it is, or like as touching as it is. Because I've seen versions of this movie that I haven't really enjoyed, but Guy Ritchie knows how to do the action, simplicity of the story. Because, you know, complex espionage, he simplified the shit out of this story. Anybody could watch this thing and understand what's going on, which is really cool. And then the heart, man, he captures that somehow. And it's a simple movie. The budget was only like 55 million. And I think that this is just going to do really well once it comes onto, you know, it's on PVOD, but once it goes to like a streamer or something, people are going to lose their minds over this movie. Because it gives you a perspective on all sides.
Yeah, and I mean I think that's a good example of like the other side of what I was describing before, where, you know, I think it came out the 20th or the 21st of April. So, you know, that was, you know, same difference. I mean, it was on PVOD within 2-3 weeks, you know, and it's because, it was only 55 million. It's like one of those mid, you know, 30 to 50, 30 to 60 that we don't see a whole lot of. But sadly, this is why, because it's only made 15 million worldwide. Like it was a big underperform. But you're right. I think it does seem like the kind of movie that could find an audience on demand, and ultimately wherever it ends up on streaming. You know, it does seem like the kind of movie that would, you know, pop up on the top chart or something like that eventually. No, cool way. I'm looking forward to that one. I've heard good things, and I really do think Jake is like one of my favorite actors. Like he is one of the ones that I would see in everything that he does. I don't know. I just and the trailer for this I thought was really good too. So I was excited to see this one. I wanted to mention a movie I saw called The Artifice Girl. Have either of you heard of this? It's like a direct to, you know, PVOD, or, you know, small indie film. The only real name in it that most people would probably recognize is Lance Henriksen is in a little bit of it. But this is a kind of sci-fi, thought-provoking kind of drama about the way in which like a government agency is able to use AI, or use, you know, a new computer platform or program to find and apprehend like online predators. And the movie's great. I mean, I highly recommend. This is a movie that nobody knows. You know, it popped up on a newsletter that I get weekly, and someone was raving about it, and I found it and checked it out, and I thought it was great. But it's written and directed and stars this guy named Franklin Rich, who hasn't really done much else, and I'm curious whatever he has coming up next, because this was a really interesting movie. He plays Gareth, who is like the guy who creates this computer program that basically is, it's funny how they introduce it in the movie, because they kind of introduce it in a way that is like it references like how he used to work for like Star Wars, and the character in the movie.
Oh wow.
And like he did like CG, and like his specialty was, you know, the characters that are kind of the questionable ones, like characters that have died in real life, that they use like image capture and footage to like recreate a person in a film, like something like, you know, Carrie Fisher or Peter Cushing, or no, not, is it Peter Cushing that they did in Rogue One? Anybody? John?
Yes, Rogue One. It was Peter Cushing who
Right. So like they framed this around that. That's what that guy did. Like that was his like background,
like a completely synthetic recreation of an actor whose face we know really well, and filming it like it's just an actor in the movie, like not
precisely. And kind of what he does is that he somehow creates this computer program that is fully digital, but it's like a person. It looks like a girl. It looks like a kid.
Oh wow.
Is basically in these online forums these chat rooms baiting these predators that they then turn over to like a government agency
Wow.
to like
It's like to
capture
catch a
them.
predator the next level, because there's not even the person that they have posing.
Right. And I mean, it's kind of crazy like when they get into how the AI works and everything, but just because I like sci-fi, you know, obviously when, like Ron just said, we appreciate that it was recently created, and
I know
just
it's
want
one of the
to
freshest genres around.
give it its attention now. But yeah, I don't know, just the way they frame this new technology in this movie, and it's also told really interesting because like the movie's told in 3 chapters that take place over decades. You know, basically a chapter where in which we learn about what's been created and how they plan to use it. And there's a chapter that's talking about, you know, how it's progressed and how it's changed in ways that they never foresaw and ways that they can't control. And in the future, you know, the 3rd chapter is kind of like the future, and it's progressed even more, and like our main character is in his, you know, 70s 80s, and it's like at the end of his life. It's just a really cool little movie that really kind of reminded me a little bit of like a David Fincher type, the way it's made. It kind of has a Fincher tone and look and vibe to it. The dialogue is really great, and it's a lot of talking, but the subject matter is really interesting, and just the world that we're in now, and especially the, you know, the relevance of what AI is doing. They're doing in so many different areas.
Wow.
Yeah, this is just a movie I wanted to mention because again, I had never heard of it, and I saw the box art for it and like one of the like release calendars that I'd seen, and then when it was in the newsletter, it was like I referenced it. I was like, oh, I saw that, and the guy reviewed it and he loved it, and so I was like, okay, I gotta find it and look at it. So yeah, it's on all the VOD platforms, and again, it's called The Artifice Girl. um
When you said the name the first time on my Zoom call, it was a little crackly. So I
mhm.
was checking, did he say the Artifice Girl? And I looked on Lance Henriksen's Wikipedia
Yeah,
to find the movie. Scrolling down through his filmography,
it's crazy.
this guy's never stopped working at
It's
all, and he's
crazy.
got like 3 things in the four things in the can that haven't come out yet. I mean, not that it surprises me. He's one
Yeah,
of those guys who pops up in a lot of stuff, and he does a lot of like cable and low budget type stuff. But it still was interesting to realize, man, you know, if you wonder where he's been, you just haven't been paying attention, because he has not stopped being
it's
in
wild. Yeah, and I mean,
9 things a year.
and he's in like one of the chapters, but he's like the really kind of the anchor of the final chapter of this movie, and
Sounds really
he's
interesting.
he's really good in it. He's really good. The movie's great. I mean, it's kind of like out of nowhere. Like I know I raved last episode about how to blow up a pipeline, but like literally I watched this like the day after we recorded, and I was like, wow, this movie is like one of the better movies I feel like I've watched this year.
Oh,
Just
wow.
because it's because I had no awareness of it and I had no expectation of it.
Yeah.
And it's one of
Yes,
those things I'm just like, I hit play, I sit back, I'm like, I have no idea what this is even about beyond what I read in the review and like kind of what this reviewer critic thought. And I didn't even watch a trailer. I just hit play. I saw his name. I was like, oh, cool, at least somebody. But the rest of the people I did not recognize. Um, but it's very thought provoking. It's just, you know, it's like just technology in the future, and is the future now. And you know, it's a really cool little movie, and I think you guys should check it out.
Cool. Thanks, man. I'm gonna definitely check that out. That sounds really interesting.
Yeah, I think you would like it a lot.
Cool.
Anything else you guys have watched or started watching? Or
I feel like next week there's going to be a lot more. There's movies that I sort of queued up. Oh, that's out. Oh, I want to check this out. I still want to see a couple things you recommended last time, Steve, but I had not been able to watch much in the way of movies this last week. What we did, we're all caught up on our shows, so we've caught up on all the Dave that's out there to offer. I forget Barry. We've been talking about. You know, I mean, that's where I've been mostly outside of the required stuff, is just trying to keep abreast of all the television shows, and those seasons have both been really strong so far too.
oh, for sure, yeah. All right, cool. Well, next week, hopefully, I don't know, we're trying to plan it out now, but hopefully we all may try to attend the Fast 10 advanced screening if it works out, or at least some combination of us will see that movie in time to be able to talk about it on the podcast next week, as it comes out next Friday. The second to last Fast movie, as they've said. But
you think this
hopefully
one's finally going to get into the subject of family? I feel like they've
been teasing it for 9 other movies, so hopefully we finally see what it's all about.
And something.
But besides that, you know, don't, again, to mention the Riders of Justice was my pick for required viewing, and again, that's excuse me, that's on Hulu if you want to watch that as well. Because, like I said at the top, it's not required for the listeners, but it is recommended, and it would be nice.
I predict that whatever the quality of that movie is, next week is going to be a Mads Mikkelsen love fest. We're all going to come in here with little hearts in our eyes from watching a Mads Mikkelsen movie. I love that guy. I love that guy so much.
He's
too,
like
man.
He's so versatile. He's great, man. He's so
versatile,
good in everything.
and he's who you'd
So-
want him to be in interviews
Yeah.
and stuff too. You know, he like
Yeah.
And if anything I said about that movie didn't hook you, he's got a monster beard in it, and he looks incredible. So that if that doesn't put you over the top, I don't know what will.
this is a beard
yeah.
positive show. People can
Obviously,
people that watch
yeah.
the video version
Yeah.
know that. Yeah.
Heck yeah.
Yeah, it's one that I admire and strive to reach, but only Mads can do it, not me. All right, cool. Well, that'll be the episode of movieshmovie.com. It's the website, youtube.com/movieshmovie podcast. If you're going to do that video element that John just mentioned, you make sure you subscribe, hit the bell to get notifications when the new episodes come out there as well. And if you do, either follow on YouTube, subscribe on YouTube, follow, and any audio version of this podcast. If you can please leave a review or a rating or share it with a friend, or an enemy. I don't know. It doesn't matter. Just share it in general. That would,
if you hate
it'd be
somebody
great.
and you hate this show,
Yeah, just at least pair us up. Maybe we have a chance
make
with that
them watch
person.
it.
Yeah, there it is. All right, cool. Well, good seeing you guys, and we'll see you next week. And as always, you've made our day. Thanks.
Bye.